so Jebada, Machine Billion because she was just under so Jeba setting on the so Jebi, she had the so Jeki she down, and the so J Joa Samba, and Tartu she sent a Duchen, Dina she down on the Jibareda, Machine Billion Badia, Gangu gets he chair, then and then Jugu Joa chair, then and then Samba chair, and the Tartuk or Duchen, as she was a Duchen who should hook in.
Good evening. Last time we started to look at the 10 non-virtues, and we looked at the first two, those of killing and stealing. And these two are divided, as are all 10, into 4 parts: the basis, the attitude, the performance, and culmination.
대단 냠도 유딩에다 심지어 셈바티 소주베 레티 쳐고 디니에다 굴노하다 조하다 타르세데 야라르 책으로 소주베 레원에다 그래서네 소주베 내가서다 심지어 셈바치어와 어디 소주베 레세지 나 디니기 레디 개와치마 안능아서 나서기 투예기 레기 뉴바디 차선 조발라 갈고선 굴는 그거래 안에 지게 조하다니 굴노하다 두셰다 Then do she Matuata and it's somebody Yomo best Yomo Gugore and Delia and Tarduku, which is Chasanji Chigmasana, and Lelam Chasan Togo Mares, Nuba Chasan Togo Mares, or the deeper Sagor in a Lelam Chasan Togo Mares, Dina Jim Machimba Lemba Sadia, Machimba Lembe Sadia, and Denigi Shangi Zi, Gui Negasu, and the Simju Sembatida, Machimbe. Le Atisha ore. Chizandi le dia, Kiawachima Mason, Kitinigi le, Nivoyon Zobala, and Samba, Joa, Tardo Shazan Sango, Redina, Chigma Sabaina, Lela Mioso Zoba Chago Mares, then Divat Chagore, in Ada Lela Mioso Chag Mares. All this, all I can see that on anybody.
Not only are each of the 10 non-virtues divided into these 4 subdivisions, but the second subdivision, that of attitude, is itself divided into 3. So you have the overall 4 of basis, attitude, performance, and completion, and then the attitude is divided into 3, namely that of differentiation, affliction, and motivation. So, or discernment, differentiation, discernment, or affliction, and motivation. So those are the 3 components within the attitude and that's how all 10 are presented. We also spoke about last week in terms of where, in terms of the basis, attitude, performance, and culmination, is the actual karma itself found. And that is within the mental factor of intention. If there is intention, then karma is accumulated. But for the accumulated karma to have the sufficient strength to propel a rebirth, the sufficient strength or capacity to propel a rebirth, then the karmic path, the karmic action needs, or the karma needs to be complete. So all 4 of these components, basis, attitude, performance, and completion, all 4 are required, and then the karma accumulated will have sufficient capacity to propel a rebirth, to be a propelling karmic imprint. If any of these parts, basis, attitude, performance, or culmination, is not accumulated, then karma, negative karma, is still accumulated, and that negative karma, that negative karmic imprint, can still ripen into suffering, but it lacks the capacity to propel a rebirth.
Now the loyam said it, he goes to share it. On the that loyam did Chibarita loyam said she and Samba Joa and Tartu said she Chibarita is just.
So we'll continue where we concluded last week, starting with sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct, like all 10, have the same four divisions of basis, attitude, performance, and completion.
Adadine loyem gis shile sa dangbo dreja mimbani and mala soba dang me sungba soki bume dang jeba tamje dang mani dang rabchuma os shiri.
So reading from the middle page 125, the basis has, among the four bases of sexual misconduct, the first inappropriate persons is those you should not have sexual intercourse with, your mother and so forth, women under the care of their mothers and so forth, all men, hermaphrodites, and ordained women.
제기 시딜라 시 마선나도 시 최세 유체 네양라체 네단 뒤세디 디니 샤고레 네단 뒤세디 수샤고레 디 시콩으로 샤고레 로임집이 시나라 시기 시리에서 디레다 로임이 시라 시리에서데 시리가레스네 로임제 유체 디니 양라체 안에 시 네체 안에 뒤세디 시디 샤고레.
First, the sentence starts with, among the four bases of sexual misconduct. So there are four, so the basis has four subparts: inappropriate persons, inappropriate body parts, inappropriate places, and inappropriate times.
That loim jewi shidela jewi yu shidela da tangbo dresha mimba ni se dresha mimba ni se ne da loim jeegi kisegi yu dela loim sungu ra de sungu zana da loim sungu zada di da jawa cheba na da loim ke do yegi shidela kare san dresha mimba sin loim sungan ji loim sungan gaza ki da di ma kasore ne bejeta 자위 자와 제마 쳐봤어. 그러다 자와 제마 쳐봐디. 제제 민바세 디소리즘. 내가 가르스는 마 세드 소스게 마 소스게 말라스 마스 그러다 소소 말라 소바다 시도와 말라 소바다 시데 마유그레 분야유그로와 안 말라 소바다 소바. 되네 네 메송와 세드 메송와 세시. 메송와 소기 부메다서没送啊，那那结巴老说不送啊，现在是送人。
要不要就跟
没有送啊说给不灭的，现在反正人。
Among the four bases of sexual misconduct, so those are the four divisions. We're looking at the first, that of inappropriate persons. So inappropriate persons is the object towards whom sexual misconduct is directed. And then several illustrations are presented. Inappropriate persons is those you should not have sexual intercourse with, your mother and so forth. So this would include one's relatives. Women under the care of their mothers, women under the care of their mothers, and so forth.
This and Geva se Geva Tamjeta, Geva said that Chasam Soma Son Kishama Geva Tamjeta answer. Say Manida, then a Rapchuma, Net Negi Rapchuma Tutuba Tisula, and this Pajele, or Disulia, and this Jike Denegi, and the Tushu Cheva Ina. Loim Kigores, Chesada, Tesul Loim Sundu, Tesul Chugo Mares, etc.
Give us in a book.
Give us a bourgeois.
And further illustrations are all men have hermaphrodites and ordained women.
Ada Yala Mimba said, that Suzuki Sada Inaya, and the Suzuki Sada Inaya, that Tuacheti. 나고 많이 비게 칼라서 봐 아주 주말에서 나고 많이 방하고 산데 뭐선 이루어다 얘네 멤비게 다가나 한 상람 쪽보다서라서 뒤설이야 이제 주고 말해서 대제베네 아직 로임 공체 로임 계로 그래서 로임차 제마초 유디스래.
And the second of the four bases is that of inappropriate body parts. And these are those other than the entrance to the womb, such as the mouth.
네들아 대야지기 소수게 사다이나 차고 주비 갑라 네들아 야지기 Lama Yosegi Tam Tiwada, and Chedin Yosada, Kunda, that's the Dugan, Kunda Yosada, Sanji, Kusung Tutin Yosa Tam Duadin Chisho Marese.
Inappropriate places are in the vicinity of gurus, places with stupas, and the like. So wherever there may be representations of the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, so where there may be statues or stupas and so forth.
That do you mean by that do you mean by Ranga Sada Inaya, do you mean by and the Sigo Subo, the Poo Hortiba, the Jumata, Poo Kima Tapala Sopata, Deneda, Yaji Yenigi Domba Leche. Yenegi Domba Lende, Denegi, and the Sige, Snunia Cablia, then and the Tajin Sojon Domba Dush, then Sojon Shudabaina, on the Lati Capsudat, or Jeshuomar Esword.
And then fourthly, inappropriate times are during pregnancy, when you're keeping one-day vows and so forth. So one-day vows would include, for example, if one is doing a nyungne. So that would be an inappropriate time.
Mm-hmm. Then, that's somebody sumyore chete sambala sumles, that do shit, and the Kulon Yomo se sum chagirwa. Sambala sumle, dushini, duale, dela, der dusheba, sheba, she matuala, compressunlas.
The second of the four outlines, that of attitude. Among the three aspects belonging to attitude, the discernment is explained as follows. The Compendium of Ascertainment says, discerning that as that, which indicates that a non-mistaken discernment is necessary.
Ode gasuri dua nala dini sonyo reje sisan dua nala dere dusheba si dele matua chkure. Dene de dua le se papa tomi son bigi dua setire the mi ajuge sanchumna jibi haje dua lung seti mare. Oda dua nala da de chumne digi da ngadu duwe gi shung nala sonya nala kar sonya dua le misa chugi pambala Dushe Trumatu Tower songs, Chisa Duanaya, and the Rabjung Digi, and then Chigi Pambakia or the Pambar, Gelona, Geloma, Pambakia, and Kesu Digi, and the Pamdra said Kevala, Injimishi Dushi Matua, Kugo, Maratushi Tua, the Matua, Chibares or Tigores.
The Compendium of Ascertainments is a text composed by a Sangha. It's not to be confused with a particular sutra with a similar name by the Buddha. And Lama Tsongkhapa continues. The Vinaya states that in the case of a defeat of impure conduct, it is the same whether the discernment is mistaken or non-mistaken. So for those who are ordained, whether monks or nuns, then the discernment can be either mistaken or non-mistaken.
Adelia dua said Papa Thomas and dua said Dushemato Gure said Rangi Sada Yimbachi Rangi Sada Minaya Shangi the Rangi Sada Yimbadi Yimbadi Mato Gure said that Rangi Mishandaji Sada Yimbachila Rangi Sada Sambaina didn't do she tour what do you to the Adi and the law Loyam said the king Mevakashi or Dushemato Gures. She said the Loim Jedu, Range Sada Mayimbachi, or the Range Sada Mayimbadi, Limba Sevo, Dire Mare Sevahos, Kugure, to Sheti Google Mato, Tara, Mishana Sadajila, Range Sada Yimba, on Range Sada lesson Truaina, Tishu Truaretine, Deleam, and the Chick Missa Jobena, Loim Chago Managere.
In the Sangha's, so just going back up, in the Sangha's Compendium of Ascertainments, it says there that non-mistaken discernment. It states that the non-mistaken discernment is necessary. So this refers to, for example, if one is mistaken. One thinks one is having sexual relations with one's spouse, but it actually is someone else. But one does not know. One has the wish or the intention to have sexual relations with one's spouse, but is actually with someone else. So this would be a case where the discernment is mistaken and therefore is not non-mistaken, and therefore it would not be an illustration of sexual misconduct.
Na de tuyen na ya jugi jewa na kar son sen rangi yimbi dushi ki shenji chume gandu sona lelam du migwa da ngosa tadi dushi chua charo rangi chuma res mi shenji chuma sam trosha ba na dushi chu dirwa lelam gyu mare hese anda shenji chuma la dele shenji chuma res sam bige dushi chu ba na da dera ane ajo roim jwa da mi jwa an shi sun yi re je da ene mi shanda ji chuma chi la o shanda yin ba ha wo je di an shanda chi yin ba chi la bene du shi chu wei na ne de la ane che jwa da me jwa shi dan yin wo re se.
The Lama Tsongkhapa refers to a third source. The Treasury of Abhidhamma Auto Commentary explains that if you approach someone else's wife, perceiving her to be yours, this will not constitute the path of action under discussion. So it would not be an illustration of sexual misconduct. And getting involved with someone else's wife while perceiving her to be the wife of yet another person may or may not constitute such a path.
pension ne be sembe skune na cheba an ji tene mo be wong cheba timu wong cheba te sum mo re yo modela de sha she ta timu sum mo re che gabriela de sha cheba gabriela khon re che ga ye ti timu ge cheba na so yong re che.
In terms of, because the attitude has these three components, so we looked at that of the discernment, then that of the affliction. And as the text says, it can be any of the three poisons. So one may engage in sexual misconduct, either under the influence of confused ignorance, or under the influence of attachment, or under the influence of anger. And just to say, this word I translate as confused ignorance. It's a not knowing and not understanding the topic, or having a misunderstanding about the topic. It is a different Tibetan word from the ignorance in terms of the ignorance of reality. So it's an incorrect or a lack of correct understanding.
Can't see.
Then finally, the motivation is the desire for sexual intercourse in a manner that constitutes impure conduct. The performance consists in striving for that goal. And the completion consists in the two joining with each other. So that then concludes the three non-virtues in terms of physical behavior, then starting with those in relation to speech. The first of which is lying, and we see clearly in our book that it has the same four outlines of basis, attitude, performance, and completion.
Gang Jun Xie Ji Dang Xie Si Yu Qi Ni Wu Ruo Zhi Jun Ma Wei Xi Se Wo Jun Ma Wei Xi De La Gang Jun Xie Ge Xi Te Da Gang Xie Se Ge Yu Qi Ni Wu Ruo Di Ga Da Jun Ma Wei Xi Le Xi Na Ne Ju Ro shi zui ma wei shi de la gang xie ge zui da gang la xie ge yu ni cha de wo chi da da zui ma wei shi de la ni yo re se ni re se de ni se.
The basis says among the two bases of lying, so that we have one, the first, the express basis, and then later we see the object understood. So these are the two parts to the basis.
绝别系最些个系些个系的了，可是绝别系呢，通话贴吧，接着切吧，那么些吧系当，得来多吧系我是。
Among the two bases of lying, the express basis refers to the four, that which one has seen, heard, differentiated, or understood, as well as their four opposites.
绝别系呢，通话写的，说通哪样，那通马上写的最些就是通话写的通哪样，通马上写最些的，贴吧写的贴哪样，贴马上写最些。写中国话，这些那接着切吧，是的，接着都那现在这些说是没说干些，没这这些说是接着写中国话，接着是呢，这个没说干些，这可是古马家说是，古马家说了嘛，那是古马家说，那这个我古马家说是的，接着写那些就，那没这个古马家说是写中国话的接着切吧是，切吧切那些的是。但那不是写吧，是的，但人家好过呢，好过马上写的，因不一起来，买因呢，可是买因不起来，热写，好过呢，好过上写的，最写老说把它因不起来，买因不起来，热写最写中国的话，这是因色的，是写的。
So, the express basis refers to the four. That which has been seen, heard, differentiated, or understood. So seen refers to if one has seen something and then saying one hasn't seen it, or if one has heard something and saying one hasn't heard that. So these are clear illustrations of lying. Differentiated, this would be, for example, if you're saying, I know the person didn't steal silver, they actually stole gold. So in that way, one would lie. And then understood, this would be if one understands something but says, no, I have no idea, I do not understand. And the opposite is exactly that. So if you haven't seen something and you say you have, or you haven't heard something and you say you have, or you do not understand something and you say you do, so these would be illustrations of the opposite.
And then me Geshe the current Turson and Turban and Thomasons Geshe. And then I said that any Turner Thomason share. And Lerach Kuya do some visit and what do Geshe and Jamada Leradici Majaven. Jim and Asia Mazinga called Thomason, Joran Shemason, I sing it Thomason said, Zinshet, I'm a Zinshet Chunguru, I do sing the Tirua. And then I shame. 这样这个马桶呢，通说说的，我的这个他马桶呢，他通说这马桶这通说是马桶呢通说说的，马腿呢腿说是写就是我的，这是的那个的，这是的那个准写的。
These illustrations are quite straightforward. You can imagine many scenarios where someone, for example, comes to you and says, "I've lost something," and you know what they're looking for and where it is, but it's you to decide for whatever reason to tell them you have no idea where it is. Or if someone asks if you've heard something, and you have, but you tell them you haven't, or vice versa. Or if you're asked to do something and you don't do it, and then you are asked why not, and you say, you never asked me. So these would be illustrations of dishonesty, of lying.
다 준시 세계 강사 유지를 고지 유니 파르비비 된거 오세데 단 요데 준시 세계 유지 강사의 시고래.
So of the two bases, that was the first express basis of what was said, and the lie that was said. And then in terms of the person to whom the lie is said, the object understood, is the meaning understood by the other person. So the person needs to understand what has been said.
that the goji yu parubo, that goji yu parubo, so rangle shambachigo, rangle junshina, that digoma, that dingi, she hashe, tinigi, lelam tobala, junshe, yu de rangle shambi cans, parichikure, rangle shamba imamaze, parubu kansachikure, madoya, mission, and a shing down dollar sobashina digoma, essentially, dinigi, parubiga dengo was it tinige ya dengo hangi sekansa ko sheba yi hanji ko bure shere
Il coach en poker le coach di checker che mare poker tanker.
amare da gajele sheba gyu de gyu gen gansa ko shere dengo was it de chidane tinige dengo was ni sugi tina hago han chidane sheba yu jing ma ade sheba me le ko da mo ko chi she ma.
So the object understood is the meaning is understood. So the person needs to hear and understand what one is saying. So they have to understand the language that and the words that is being issued. So this needs to be understood, not necessarily believed, but understood, and then ends with by the other person. So it's someone other than oneself. You're not lying to yourself, and it's a person. So it's not an inanimate object. So there are these characteristics. It's a person other than oneself, and they need to understand what is being communicated. They don't need to believe it, but they need to understand it.
가질레 가사 임바시 고고레서 된고와서 되네게 돈다 하고디 고한기 지다 셰바 유유겐지 가사 신고그레서 가사지 고고마다 가사레 돈다라 된고와서 가사 신고그레서 마다 란레 파로베 셰이네 가사 마인다 한지고 말에서 가사 임바시 고고레서 셰바 남주 셰지 셰바 유iten지 고고레서 인사.
For one to tell a lie, the lie needs to be understood. It doesn't need to be understood as a lie, merely what is being communicated needs to be understood. So if one were to lie in an empty room, whilst you as a person understand what's being saying, what is said, it needs to be someone other than you, and it needs to be a person. You can't lie to an inanimate object. So the lie needs to be understood. It doesn't need to be effective. It doesn't need to be believed, but it needs to be understood.
ane tongso sebige dushe gyuyada ane yimbala mahimbare mare se dushe gyuya mahimbala yimbare se dushe gyuya tebala temason se dushe gyuya ma tebala teson se dushe gyuya sokna ne ti dene hilung roda ajile dushe ni tongala an ma tongwar gyur dushe gyuwa se dushe sheba gyurche ne chet gyuratis.
Then the attitude. Among the three aspects belonging to the attitude, the first, discernment, consists in actions such as taking something one has observed and changing it into something one has not observed. So it's something that you have seen, and you say, no, I haven't. So you're saying the opposite. And then likewise, it could be something that you've heard and saying the opposite, or something that you have not seen and saying that you have. So whilst it's expressed here in one direction, it can be from a positive to a negative, a seen to a not seen, or the opposite, from a negative to a positive, from a not seeing to a seeing. And in other words, it works in both ways, and it comes down to trying to deceive.
Tis Joa Mawa Am Mimawe Mimawa Dandu Lemba Am Lugi Wigi Tsamala Tseme Dumba Osa Joa Dilla.
The mental afflictions, any of the three poisons, so again, this confused ignorance, or attachment or anger, any of these afflictions can be the part of the motivation for the speech, or linked with motivating the speech. Then the motivation is the desire to express that altered discernment. Then on to performance, the third of the four. The performance consists in indicating a falsehood by speaking, by accepting it through not saying anything, or by signaling with a physical gesture.
And the Mawam said that Jawadi Musu and it Tsipama shared the Tumusu Kanipanga when you Java Dilada, Mawa says you Rwanda.
So a lie can be said verbally by saying something.
And Jang Mimawa as a Dadu Lemba city. Na denegi tonso sine Geshe Thubten Lema Jabche and go Tome Dodo Chidu and that down to Lemba said it is Urada, denegi the Jang Mimawe, Geshe Kanagam, Tikalema Jabache, Sigma Jabache, and the Lemba Yadu Sine, Tik Tonson Dodo, in shade, and then cost ditched Joadis down to Lemba.
And whilst this is a non-virtue included within that of verbal non-virtues, one doesn't necessarily have to say anything, as we see in the next illustration, by accepting it, or what someone else says, through not saying anything. So communicating through silence, one can also deceive others.
And then the nigga Lugi gets Heme Dumba, said, just that which you get. Thompson and Thomas, because Thomas in the Nagi, Mashevache, and those in the Subu one, and taking the mutation, Thomas go you share your what and go you share. And the current Thomas and Thomas doctor go you share your in the mutumba, Samatumba star, Denisheva Seal, you get Samatumba was.
And similarly with the third illustration, again, this is make it clear that whilst this is included amongst verbal non-virtues, one can do so without speaking. And the third is by signaling with a physical gesture, such as nodding or shaking one's head. One is clearly communicating although it is without speech. And in this way, one can engage in the performance of lying.
And Jirashiki Chito Meba Mejan Dower Song said that she go by the Rangitunda Soya Yore, Shea Yore Haji, Shanagi Tundala, Rangbunyala, and Yensing Tundala, Shea Jungurua, and the carriage, the sweet on the Sheba Rangitunda Sheba another, Rai Shengitunda Sheba another, Chiba Resorta.
Moreover, the scriptures state that it amounts to the same whether you say it for your own purpose or for someone else's sake. So if you lie so as to gain some benefit for yourself, or you do it on behalf of someone else, or that someone else may gain some benefit, it makes no difference. one still engages in the activity or the performance of lying.
Rangi idea rangi tiang goba rangi rang da xian jira chi chidu me jiang zhao song su wo sa xiao du xin ne shun mo re. Na ni ne tene ya tar du ti in
But it did it. It's a chart.
ane adi da de dobo do jue se dobo ru chi kare se ne de ni jun ma wa jun da chama chi zu sum la ju yue jiang de sum du jo song so o se de ben da zu jun xie ba de la yin ji mi ju so so ran xie wo re be mi xian la xie xun de ji de be ga re sen ba ji pa ji wo de xue ba na ane jun xie de so so ma xie ba je mi xian da ji le xie xun de ji ge se wo da ji ge se jun xie de ane ciksu xie de so so ran ge si ma ciksu ma xie mi xian da ji le ciksu ma ji de ji ge se jun ciksu ane jun da chama jie de pa su chama jie de ya rang ge ma ji be xian jia ji le xie xun de ji ge rang ge jie ba na ji ge rang ge ma ji xian ji le xie xun de ji ge re se wo da da de dong de li ya jiu xi ge ra de bu jun xie de da rang ge ji mi ji rang ge xie gu gu re be rang ge ma xie na ane jun cha ge ma re se jun xie bi nie ba sa ge ma re lam na an de la ane ji rang ge xie na ji ge rang ge ma xie ba ji xian ji li ya xie xun na ji ge re se de jiu wa se de xian ji le xie chu pa se wo re xie xun na ji ge re se jun da chama ci su sum bo di rang ge xie ya ji ge rang ge ma xie ba xian ji le xie xun na ji ge re se.
So to clarify that, then Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from Asanga. Here, Asanga's texts say that the three, lying, divisive speech, and harsh speech. So we're in the first of the four verbal non-virtues. And here, Asanga is saying this one and the following two become paths of action for yourself, even if you get someone else to perform them. So this again is quite clear. One can accumulate non-virtue even if someone else is doing it at your behest. So you may not be the one saying the lie or indicating the lie through a gesture, but someone else doing so at your direction, you still accrue the non-virtue.
Adi denege soya di gawa soya re sene ane adi ka sori papa tome gi sadi nga sadi gi dina de soya re jere da.
Got it. I said that.
The Inji check out there.
Go to the peep. So it's that there was a different. So it's a good. They
Sadi luxida.
So we have here in English, here Asanga's text says, and the particular text from Asanga, I just had to look the English up, is the level of yogic practice, or compendium of that, the level of the level of yogic practice. So it's a text that Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from quite often.
Tang dina de jun chama ciksu sub di shan yi xian na ti ge se na xia di da shan gi shan pa xie xun de ti go ma so so ran xie wo le zhe na xia ge se.
So the fourth verbal non-virtue, that of, I think it's called here, idle talk. I prefer translating it as engaging in speech for no particular purpose. This is something that one has to engage in oneself. If someone else does so at one's direction, as Sangha says, you do not accrue non-virtue. It is a non-virtue you yourself have to engage in. So therefore, of the four verbal non-virtues, there are three that you can accrue non-virtue if others do so at your behest. That of lying, of divisive speech, and harsh speech. Whereas if someone engages in speech for no particular purpose at your behest, you yourself do not accrue non-virtue.
ngāgi shīgā chūwī ki lēlam nū gyūrā shēdō lūpi yīngi nā chū nāla karasūngā sīne chūn chāma cītū ngā kia shīgā rāngi jē nā tīgōrā rāngi mā chūwī shēnli pā shēchū nā tīgōrā yāchirē.
Whereas this is not a view universally held. Here we see in the next line that Bendigo Vasabandhu, he says, the root text of water commentary of the treasury of Abhidhamma, so here Vasabandhu, says that all four non-virtues associated with speech become parts of action when you get someone else to perform them.
Dan dine duwe nala ya duwa nala karasungora sene dine ki dar rapchungi dine ki zun chama tsidu nga kya shepi tunga kyeba la an duwa leni deda ki tardu rangi kyewa kasa tardu tunga kyeba la rangi meba kweba sungsu ho sayade rang soso rangi shegora ma do soso rangi ma mi shenda le kyu shiro chesin shenda she chubi an tunga kyewa ma des zada duwa nala ya rapchung dige tunga kyeba zun shepi ki zun chama tsidu nga kya shepi tunga kyeba la an inji miji rangi shegora eses shongyo rechire.
To ensure that he communicates a broad presentation of different views and different contexts here. Therefore, the context of the ordained, the Vinaya states that in order to produce a complete infraction, you yourself must speak.
rangi shegor be inji mi rangi shebi kugure kugu mare se doje chedu da ne sadi lukje na chin chama chu shedi an shan rangi she na da shan de she chuna di gores na cha di so so ran she gores che gores se chi sung do da de ne lo be yin yu da de ne ge jje na song na che ban na chin chama chu shi ga rangi she ba yin ya ne ye lam zu gore ne shan de she chu ba yin ya ne le lam zu gore chi ba re se chi cha do dan duwe lu nalma shonyo du rabjung namgi ane denegi tuen shebeke denegi tunga keba la jundi inchimi rangi she orma do shari ya shiro chingna bat shebeke tuen sheba digi rangla tunga keba chak mare chida rangi tunga keba la inchimi rangi she gore esa chi.
Sangha then is saying that if one directs someone else to engage in verbal non-virtue, if that verbal non-virtue is lying, harsh speech, or divisive speech, you, as the one directing this, will also accrue non-virtue. But that is not the case for speech of no particular meaning. Then Vasabandhu disagrees with that. He says, if you direct someone to engage in a verbal non-virtue, whatever that may be, you accrue the non-virtue. And then the Vinaya says, for one to accrue a complete infraction, you must do it yourself. If you direct someone else, you will not commit a complete infraction of your vows. You have to do it yourself. So then there are these three differing presentations.
다 탈도디 파셔디기 고와디를 권네티 거래다. 파셔 준시사 간사디기 어디 코에 준시에 칙디 권네티 거래다.
And the completion we see, the completion consists in it being understood by the other person.
And 그 준시에바 임바디다 고하당 투고야 마고 준시에바디 그 하고는 군 준시에바디 그 준시에바 하고는 고하당 중국 고당 말와 지난 그 주의 하고 나래 마게나래 파주 미디기 그 주의식을 봐 하고 나야래 마고나래 간실에 주의식이 칙디 그 암절로 권내지 거다 탈도리.
The person to whom one is lying, they do not need to be deceived. They do not need to be taken in by what you are saying. They may even roll their eyes at this obvious lie. But they have understood what you have said, and therefore the act is now complete.
Angele dang anjogi juin shebegi anachige juin sheche diba sache dinige mal ngason ki lelam chen diba chasan ngason ki ledi da juin shebe ledi ngason ki leru chik chawa ki chabala ane da desu ki chasan sanwa ko bor desu chigma sawa ina ane legi lamdi yaso moso jogo mareche 그 디바드 사고래 마도 디 뉴바디 차상 맞어 봐서 나성이 마기 투에게 뉴바디 차고 말해.
Just to repeat something I said earlier in the class, if one engages in any of these non-virtues, such as this of lying, and all four parts are complete, so the basis, the attitude, the performance, and the completion, if all four of these are done, then the non-virtuous karmic path one has accrued, it has the capacity to propel a rebirth in the lower realms. If any of those four are absent, one still accrues non-virtue that can result in suffering, but that non-virtuous karmic imprint lacks the capacity or the potency to be a propelling karmic imprint. It cannot propel a rebirth in the lower realms, but it can still lead to suffering.
Desha daja lewe yina, nga zuge tongwa yina, dinegi ane chigi sikoli da tongso yase kishiwe yina, nga zuge samnala ya, ane oda ko suga ligido nyingche, da ko sugiri sempi, ko solo gyobiyagi tuandala ya, ko le ya nyingche solo gyobiyagi tuanda, ane dushina samdaja, nga dele samno kyache tatumida, oda ko sugan kora ya, da divasaje, di kiwa chima, the Duganyo Chagri Ninche Sempic Suga Yungan Gaza de Ninche Adam, Susa Gaza dia, and the soul Gavia Ninche Solo Gavia Tandalea, and the Ku and Chigi Tonang Tomaso said, then Tomaso didn't ma Dromaso, Sushevina, and the Garioris and Edina de Gartangoris and that Jushegi Shitawar, she said Gaza dia, Yore, Juindia Shevare, Tonaya, Tomason and Shevare, or Jushevare. 주인셰비 시차와래 다 주인셰기 군노요래 가선 오다 준디 뭐 주인셰기 인산be 군노요와 다 두셰요래 가선 데니마 도안에 드마서스 백셰기 데티시어스 두셰요래 근데 차와래 시차와래 군노 차와래 두셰 차와래 안다 가르제네 타르도데 가르 조안에 고시에기 지칸 마시에 고주 조시에도 조와로 시거로와 데네 탈도 되가서는 시에는 파셔도 미디기 파셔도 수요가 영원디고 고사로 하고 탈도 줍사로와 제가 시 줍사레 두시 군롱 조와 탈도 차상 줍사레야 다 진단에 가르쳐요 말하시네 녀모디요 말다 녀모 차요 가르서는 그 군롱어디 디 녀모며 말 때가서 대화샤가 원도 시에요 말에 콘도 원도 시에요 말이 원도 시에요 말에 몽배 원도 시에요 그 가르서는 펜베 심지 군에 라제 시에바로와 제가 디네기 판심이요 반자 판베심기 셰반자 요몽 메반자 제가 딘 주인시비기 디버지 사고르슨 디버지 사바레 마도 디기 주인시비기 레디 다 나선기에게 레기네 차고 말해 제래
딕나삭
디버를 중거래 디버 전셔 중거로 가서 주인시 사러 주인시반 주인시비 디버 중거로
Then the question may come, what if one tells a lie with a good motivation? So, for example, the classic illustration, you see an animal fleeing in desperation, and a few moments later, the hunter comes along asking if you saw where their prey had gone. So now, you know what the animal they are looking for, you know where it went, but you point them in the wrong direction, or you say to them, no idea, it's been very quiet, I've been out here all day, nothing's come past. So in either way, one is intentionally telling a lie. So is non-virtue accumulated or not? So there is a basis in that the express basis in that you're either saying something that you have seen, you haven't seen, or you are saying it went in one direction or instead of the other, so that the express basis is there. The object is understood, so the person that you are lying to understands what you are saying. And then the attitude is there, in that you are wanting to lie, so you have the motivation to express this, the altered discernment. And you have engaged in this, the lie, you have told this lie, and then it has been understood by the other person. There is a part missing, though, and it points to that one's motivation was not afflicted, but it was rather virtuous. One told a lie out of compassion for the being who was fleeing for its life, as well as compassion for the hunter who was in pursuit of accumulating negative karma. So therefore, the mental affliction, that component of the attitude, is absent. One did not tell the lie out of confused ignorance, attachment, or anger, but rather out of compassion. So therefore, the various components are not fully completed, but one aspect, that of mental affliction, is missing. So therefore, when we ask, was non-virtue created from this lie? Absolutely, because many of the components were there. But it is not a complete action, and therefore the non-virtuous karmic seed does not have sufficient potency to lead to rebirth in the lower realms, but it can lead to suffering, because again, it was a non-virtue, one told the lie. So that's one key part. That is not a complete a non-virtuous action, but it is still a non-virtuous action. Cannot lead to rebirth in the lower realms, but it can lead to suffering. Then the second component is that the non-virtue accumulated because of the power of the virtuous motivation. That non-virtue accumulated will be slight. It would not be of the same magnitude as if one was telling a lie out of with an afflicted motivation.
Beshe Yashabayana, Christians, Chusegi, Dondalia, and Costushine, Yashabain, Yayubanada, Nadinegi, and you get that Otakoti Surbanat, that Mambuchi, Semja Shiru, Ninches, and Semjan, Mia Mitisuga, so Joviala, and the Corona in there, and Chico. So to be deep among Mosai to Amo Younger Sembe, Nije, that some Dustin, some Daje, Tenegi Kui, Trenjadi, Kuma Capsha, and Kumaina. That then Jezadelia, that Chasan Sangore, she Kumakui, she Sangore, she Kumakui, she Sangore, then the Guno Yor Kumakudi, Kuno Yore, Dushi Yore Matua Yore, and then Dushi Yor Chazai, Joa, Kumaku Joa, Tardu, and Kusa Kuba, Kusavat Kure, Tartugore. That career sene nyomoyo nyomo tsaya mare tisa desha on the shibu amare konde on the shibu amare mombe on the shibu amare that person guedi panbe semi shen so kyobiada korongi korole ninje diva maya diva ya korol momba da ga matege di tandalia semi chiku inza sisa kumaku arete kumaku big lelam on so soba chayo madi di diva di diva To
give another illustration, let's say someone you know, they enjoy fishing, and you know that every time they come back from the lake, they have several dead fish with them, and they're very joyous at their successful day. But you know they've created a lot of non-virtue, because they go out and they not only kill, but they kill with joy, and therefore the non-virtue is amplified by their joyous attitude. So out of concern for these beings who value their life, even though they're just fish in a lake, as well as concern for your friend who kills with such joy, you decide, I'm going to steal their fishing rod. I'm not just going to hide it away, but I'm going to steal it and get rid of it so that they can stop accumulating non-virtue. So there, it is the same in that many of the components in terms of the basis, the attitude, performance, and completion for your stealing, your theft, is present, but in terms of the presence of a mental affliction as part of the attitude, that is absent. So therefore, one accumulates non-virtue, which is slight, and that slight non-virtue does not have the capacity to propel a rebirth. Again, because of understanding the presentation well, one will understand that what one has done is still non-virtuous, should be purified, but because of ensuring that I had a good motivation, where my attitude was free from an affliction, then one did not engage in or did not accrue a complete karmic action.
So Chubatan, that the Junshabati, and Rangi Machevaja Shanlia, Navana Tigriesa, Joa to the Rangi Cheva and the Shan Navas, Man Tigriesa Roda. That Dine Zadan Jubin Semjero, so Chia the Shanichi, Nachi, Seshas and Naji, that Susuki Gunwanda, that Chasan somebody, right? Jo, she, Joa, and the Dinigi Chasan Chikiyava Chekasore, Navache. Kutangwa Kuno Yobache, Dushe Yobache, and Joa, Shalamabache. And Kunoya, the Negi, Mutivash Kuore, Chisada Paradil, the Nenga Savichel, Pajo de Maso Nielia, and so the time Pesas or the Timas or some Betangi, Disugi Mes and Bege, Kunon loss on by that. And so Sugi Kosoya Masarvada, the Pajo Sura Dwandigi. How go Maroda Kosoa to water. In a Dijinga that Tambo Swish Lass, Digelia, or the Pesas or North or Tangi Jimas or something, Giovati, Pacuno, Seg, Giovat loss on by that. Then a patriotic survey in there, I draw a search up in there, and that, and Pache, Tambo did Sedu Kuno, now handle, so the Kuno Yorete, Jelly, George Sama Geniele, and then Masoniel Kuno Roba is up the Colia. She Joa and it's Tartu Chaza Dugu Venea and the Cook Paradi Kuno di loss of Izada Tambio Kuno Yobache, Duji Kuno di Memarwada, Eva and that Pegi de Tilia, Yelamioso Soba Chago, Kuma Inada, Pero Kuma in Kusho said Tambol Kuanga, Tim Ko Kua Trodu, and Kuma Saparadilla out of Timas and Timbo Loyada, and Junisha Tambo Junisha Panga. And because when I just did my senior and the Sushin, so you could not lodge others, sending him in the team master and pick your bucket, she may have some tavina, and prejudice to share that Umoko can chase on a tarduti, page to go, mother. Tardu to go, mother. Divadi or wada, divadi or that's how to lelam the Sugo matters. The age of the lelam also so what the lelam to go marriage.
And as you've heard, a number of these non-virtues, the non-virtue is accrued by oneself, even if one doesn't do it oneself, but directs someone else to, such as killing, stealing, lying, and so forth. So this is of course good to bear in mind. But then a further part to understand is, let's say, you direct someone to engage in a non-virtue, whether it's killing or stealing or to tell a lie, and they go ahead and they do it. So for them, they've engaged in accumulating a complete non-virtuous karmic path because the basis, attitude, performance, and completion was complete, and then so too have you. In the moment they complete the act, you have as well, and both of you accumulate a complete propelling karmic imprint, a complete karmic path from their one act. You both accumulate that. However, if after you set the wheel in motion, after you instruct them to engage in this non-virtue, you recall your teachings and you recognize this is wrong, and you generate regret. And let's say you cannot call off the killing, stealing, or lying. You have no way to break the other person or stop the other person's activity, but you nevertheless have generated genuine regret before they complete the act. Then when they complete the act, they themselves have completed or accrued a non-virtuous karmic path, which has the potency, the potential to lead to a rebirth in the lower realms. But you, because you have generated genuine regret before the karmic imprint was accrued, that will prevent the completion of the act befalling you, which means you will have accumulated non-virtue, but not a complete karmic path, or not a karmic path. In other words, it will not, the non-virtuous karma you've accrued will ripen into suffering, but it will not have the potency to be the potency of a propelling karmic imprint. It cannot lead to rebirth in the lower realms. And again, the reason is genuine regret was generated prior to the person you had instructed completing the act.
And that in a dushe lawyer the Pajalanga, Pajadi, Joadi, Genegi, Majebi, Niela, Dushulo, Jesana, Yamarwa, Maguinilla, and it Joadi, Kuku, Joa, Majinelia, and the Dushulo was called. Then a good son of Dushulona and Doyamaruda. Pajoli Kuru Jingaro, Miss Chisemjin Suro Jinga Saraba, Pajodi, Mazuinilla, and Dosigi, Socio Kuno Lovas called it, Dushete, that or Timas and Bore. Because Sarson and Timas and Bendigo, that quite Tartu Suicide.
So, Mother Koga and my Tartu Mother Ko.
That is a Joa said that to say, Simjan say, Joala Padra, Joala Mangurvata, to squad, just at the Masuinilla. Simjan Sir and the Masuinilla, and the Kumas in Maguinilla. Jun Machiniela, oh dear.
Mother Ko.
So the point in the sequence by which one needs to have generated genuine regret is prior to the completion. Ideally, before the act is taken, and hopefully you can call it off. But in terms of accruing the complete karmic action, regret needs to arise prior to the completion.
In Dushe Loba de la Joa Mazumilla Dushe Loba Yungurwa, Joa Mazmikel Masone, what I call dry Madronil, other Masane, and Midi dry ko Kambala, Nang de Kalaza, Didicabla, Ko Joa Gozumio Marwa, then it san, then it called Sir Admazu Komaja Joya Kosu de Joa Kosu Marwa. Cesar Davanga Sarge called Madronile, Joa Mazumil Dushe Losona Digurvada.
And of course, regret can come at any point prior to the completion. It's not it has to arise during the performance or just before the completion. It could happen immediately after giving the instruction. But at any point prior to the completion, then one, at least oneself, is protected from accruing the karmic path.
나데네게 다 십소를 심다 데네이다 차사다 나라 당한 지게 소처바다 마침발레바당 한주마기 하네 레람 요소 조바라 하네 시에서 조와 삼바 타도 차사 상고바제 삼바디 나네 두셰디게 마투하고 두셰 추소나 지고 말에 내내 두셰 마투하고 아제 한주시에 이들 베나 주시에바이나 다 주인시로시 시에이나 가리고시에는 디시긴 선배치고와 디시에 삼마데 주인현다 현다 시샤반다 다야직 다다 처음에 두시 추루로와 두시 추루고 제사 가시에 되는 두시 마투하고 그래 제사다 되게 차사 참고를 마디디나데 아니 차사를 마사바나 삼바나라 삼바나라 아니 대저를 꿀노아체 두시에 녀모지 순가 참고를 디나 두시에 마사나 지고 말 꿀노 마사나 지고 말 되네 꿀노딜래야 꿀노딜라 당보 여바지 니바테는 저와도 뭐시 마주칼라 꿀노로 선나 지금도 꿀노 무티는 고도와 tardu maru wadu kono muti ni kwaya chiri chagidwa. Dine, ane nyomo ba changu, nyomo ba mena, ane panbe semgi gune lamba ina, pansim yu cheba ina, ta chisa jawa juwe na ya, chidi lelam musu sugo mara sili, da kajili dine ki dipa chebi ki ngansuna kewa lin tuwe ki dipa sago mara sili, le chago mara sili, dipa ruchi yungo rite, di ngansuna kewa lin tuwe ki di chago mara sili, lelam. Kaji kilo chuku, chasada kajili Dondala Chasanji to Matua, Masawa Chadiga, that Chasan Masa, Kampal Mata Chasan to Sayamare, the Susan Goro Chisamena, and then the Kokan swimmen in Chisayamar, Dina Shiruchagore.
It's useful to understand the presentation well, so that if you, in the process of your own purification practice, you're investigating whether I accrued a complete non-virtuous karmic path or not, or perhaps a friend is asking you and you are discussing together, then there are these various components that are required. So, in particular, if the action has been completed, then it usually seems quite clear it has been done, then the complete non-virtuous karmic path has been accrued. But this may not necessarily be the case. Hence, it's good to know this presentation. For example, in some instances, the discernment needs to be unmistaken. In others, it can be either mistaken or unmistaken. So this difference should be known. Moreover, one should look whether an affliction was present or not. So the illustration in terms of lying, the lie was in all other respects complete, but a key component was absent. One had or engaged with an unafflicted motivation. And then furthermore, the motivation needs to continue throughout the action. If one loses the motivation, then one is likely to actually bring the action to an end, and it probably won't come to completion. So then, what this information is useful is to see whether one has accrued a particularly powerful or a weaker non-virtuous karmic imprint or not. In other words, a karmic path or not.
That Lela Myoso Masoba and Divat Pen Pembis, one get some dance to Shevena, Lela Myoso Matrinshi, Lela Myoso Masoba, in a device cigarette, Diva Savar, that did carrying was no more than the Sosugi, in case she said me, Ishimachaba, you were Ishimachaba. Ishimachaba, that would not meet Kajel. Mission bed when you're Pembis, Yakushin, and Ichimachebache, Korea Ichimache Jungo, or did it Denegi, Dibudi Twin Shebek. On Masawaja, Twin Shen, and Lela Moso, Masoba in that, the tea, my Twin Shebek, TB, Tibachungo, the Devo Carrion, Shema, Rangi, Kishisheba, and me, Shengi Yishima Yimacheba.
Just to be clear, if a karmic path is not accrued, in other words, the action is not done completely, it's not that, I dodged a bullet, I accrued no non-virtue. That is not the case. What it means is that non-virtuous karmic imprint that was accrued lacks the potential to lead to rebirth in the lower realms, but it will still ripen in a suffering way. So, for example, if one tells a lie, but all the parts are missing. So maybe one had an unafflicted motivation, like in the examples I gave. Then the way that non-virtue may ripen is that others will not readily believe you. Your words will not be perceived or taken as necessarily being honest. Even though you may well be speaking honestly, people will seem to naturally doubt what you have to say. Your words won't carry won't lead to trust necessarily arising in others. So in a way such as that, the non-virtue accrued could ripen.
And Tarduk di Parabo Gogores, Session Gogores, that Twin Sheba, the Tarduk di Parabo Gogores, Nagona Karchagres, Nachasm, Nachashagores, method, and Twin Sheba, Chagom, Nachashagres, Nagona, Nachasm. Drover, Jujili Shadows.
So you see here the completion consists in it being understood by the other person. The Treasury of Abhidharma Auto Commentary explains that if it is not understood, it becomes merely idle talk. So it needs to be understood. Again, the lie doesn't need to be believed. Just the words need to be understood, or the motion, the body movement needs to be understood. Doesn't have to be believed. And again, Treasury of Abhidharma Auto Commentary says that if it is not understood, it merely becomes talk for no particular purpose. And this is the same with the next two divisions we're about to come to, those of divisive speech and harsh speech.
파쇼리아 미튠바질라 지게 미튠바쇼바나 지게 파쇼 계시셰 지리셰셰 근데 거기 미튠바셔야 될래 셰 미튠바셔야 됐다 되네기 셰딜레 참아세고라 되네기 셰 참아서로 미튠바실라 미튠바실라 미튠바셔야 야 미튠바로 시시나 미튠 거기 미튠바셔 같이 다 gel이 튼서를 삼제 양자호 무티지 미튠바데 미튠바 제대로 된다리아 시야 파스기 시야 중으로 어디 네 어디 되네 시야 될래야 참아시고로다.
And the second of the four verbal non-virtues is that of divisive speech. So the basis of divisive speech is sentient beings. So again, it is to be spoken to someone, or to a person who are in agreement or in disagreement with each other. So here, the people that one is engaging in divisive speech with or about either can be getting on well, or they can be not on good terms. They could be in the process of reconciling, but you'd rather keep them apart. Or they could have a good relationship, but you're wanting to separate them. Or they are separated and you want to keep it like that.
the time is in Semjen Tumbadang, Midumba, so Namso, Sidadine, Danajele, Nian Cheko, Michilia, Marwadam, near. Chisada Saint Thomas Shidela, Semjen Tumbas, the Midumba, did in session.
And it needs to be at least in relation to two or more people. The basis of this divisive speech is sentient beings, so it's a plural, who are in agreement or in disagreement with each other.
That's somebody that is a Tamaji do you kuno do sheche, and then you watch it, and a jet or George Castle do sheche, and then kuno yura. Kuno nyomo sumti chivares to share that your morning archino said that chama njeduki tichi tele chicken sebe du share. Then nimi gaso di chama chicken sebe kunoche. Then and the yomo and the sha want to share ya condo one and the rock neighbor mobile on Chivat. Chivares.
You do something but what?
That you do share that didn't true that you share that it is in your man as into what you might talk or much of going in that to share the dish is a bit much as good.
So the attitude, among the three aspects belonging to the attitude, the discernment and the mental affliction are as above. So the discernment needs to be here unmistaken. One needs to be recognized that the two people or the groups are either not in harmony or are in harmony. And so it needs to be, the discernment needs to be unmistaken. And the mental affliction is either that of confused ignorance, attachment, or anger.
tumba and mitumba chedi kuno. Mitumba juvaina, the name Yaja mitumba uni dunea to says tumba messiah dondalia to send some day.
The motivation consists in the desire to divide sentient beings who are in agreement and the desire for those who are in disagreement not to be reconciled.
The Jawadi, the Mashi, the Jawadi, Demba, the meeting be Sikarungu Cheba, Karungu Cheja, Yemenia, Karu Chebas, Chitapa Joachedi, and when you Dembaru Shevena, Tigore, meeting but Jushevan Tigore. Dembar Jimini. Jidan Chambu Yoba Chila Chigi Gablol Pa, Jidan Tumbu Yoba Chila Gablolia, and Dresses, Kokata Yugena, Noticheva Yovena, Hawajin, that quite current did not achieve the current war, chill the service when the Dembashi Churwa, Dembashi when a meeting by Sinadigore. Then Jun Shaji meeting by Sinadigore. Then Shena Deli, I guess in Yambura Shena, Yambura, Meva Shena Karashina Digore.
And the performance consists in making pleasant or unpleasant statements, using true or untrue words, and saying them for one's own or someone else's sake. So the Tibetan starts with true or untrue words. So one can be either speaking honestly or dishonestly, telling lies, and but the wish is still to either keep those who are apart, to keep them apart, or those who have a good relationship, to damage that relationship. And you can do this by either lying or speaking honestly.
The Gobadi Rashan Ganung to Chirikarsun, Karichina in the Tigers, Rangi Dondalia, Chikut, Bindumasu, and the Tomacheva in the Shengi Donachevena, Chibares.
When I cannot come in.
Goba, Shego de Gova Carre, Tamajo, Gova Carre, and Sudunda, she was Rangi Dondachina, to which you done that Tamajina Tigores, Gova Rashan Kanugi, done the mouse.
And as we see here, and one can say for either one's own or someone else's sake.
That Tardo Pashe, Pache, you go at it, Siko, and Gona Tigota, Koni, Karachi, Matu, Tubna, Madum, Nagayama, Sikona Tigore, Kovas Mitigore.
In terms of completion, the completion consists in the divisive words uttered having been understood. So, as with lying, it merely needs to be understood. It doesn't need to be effective. It just needs to be understood.
That just a Chasan Sango. Just so you can meet him, some of high Mevache, and Yaji gave you Dene Session, when you so soon Dembara Session, when you come to the D. and then when you two watch a car, Charia Yungura Mini. I was there, Car Yungura. Chitadi Caso, the Kuno, when you Karachi, some of Kuno Yomare. In a quick Geshe won't give Pajo did you go in then they call meeting by child Yunguri. Chesa de Kuno Yomare, Kojo Cheva, Sheva, Pajo doing go are in a Kuno Meva, Zakolia, and the Kuno Yomare, Yomo Yomara, Casa, Yomo Mesida Mombo, won't Jeva, Bashiva, only Jeva Chagua. But the Kuno Yomare is that the Antigla Mosu Womare. In a she Yomo my pay chick so Cornelia, chick Pembe, Sambi, Kunle Lanche, Pepeg, Donda, Yawajo, Donda Shege, Shevena, they are the Jinjin, page in the Pajoka, Chadwa Yungura, Mitubacha Yungura. Tis the Dineza, the Kukulon, Yomo, Machiba Inza, and it Yaji Tamachi Bigi, Tarduti Chagmino, Chagio Machibari, the other comet.
So all these non-virtues, they have these same four components, which all need to be fulfilled for the complete karmic path to be accrued. This one, that of motivation, this may well be lacking, yet the result from one's speech may well be that people who are apart may be kept apart because of what you said, or people who are in harmony, one may actually speak and divide them. So this may well come about, but one lacks the motivation. So there it's very clear, one has not accrued this negative karma at all, because one had no wish to divide two groups of people or to keep them divided. But rather one was just speaking and one inadvertently said something which had an undesired consequence. So in this case, whilst the reaction may well be that the person you're talking to wants to have nothing to do with the other person, that was not one's motivation at all. So therefore, one has not accrued this non-virtue. And then we can conclude at that point tonight. Thank you. But there's a question. Yes, Cameron.
Is there a general rule in the type of law of rebirth that results for a person who consistently lies? Is there a general rule of what type of law will you?
Is there a general rule for what type of lower realm rebirth can follow for someone who consistently lies?
Yep. Yes.
Daddy Denegi Shebi da Daddy Shebatia, Daddy Anzuki, Daddy Yana Chasan Sango Sando Tangra, the Sangamena, now Sonle Kiki, Kushago Mare, that's what Ketugo Mare, Kanjele. That Denegi two years Chasan Sandi, but you ina, Delia, and that day, Shukshon Masona, does Chua digging Dundroliki, Ejere, Delia Nuba chair to Shena, and then Ma Ida, Delegi Nuba Chawarusina, the Chisho digida, Yawal Maki, the Chawar, as you call the Kajile, Nuba Chishun Chaware, Matuda, Nuba Chisho di Gazis Gores, and that Denayam, some of the Yajik, Kunoada, Joachi, Negapta, the Denegi, Kanga, Tigua Chishun Guruada.
Did he? Yeah, said to Bumble, Yansi,
Yansi Lebna. They could never see you or what. Yasi said, Chuju, Yasa, Chuju, Mambugazi, Domned, Sherati, then the Twinkie Massa, the Yala Chasa Massa, Yasi, Labna Chasa, and Massa, Chadrua.
So first, in terms of each individual lie, one looks at for two parts. First, whether the lie is complete, so all these 4 points are there or not. So that's in terms of each individual lie. And the second, also in relation to each individual lie, is the strength of it. So this is the strength of the lie, the severity of the lie. If the lie if we divide the severity into 3, those lies in the class of weaker lies can lead to rebirth as an animal, those of intermediate strength as a spirit, and those of a greater strength in the hells. So this is how we look at each individual lie. So in relation specifically to your question when you ask about someone who lies a lot, so there the frequency will mean many imprints are accrued, not necessarily. Lots of small lies result in lots of less strong non-virtuous imprints created, as opposed to them all coming together in one big one.
Bendigo Yongla Junxie, Narje Dayada, Majina Quajason said the Junxie, D. Genjip Corp, Narje Shu Yonga, D. Genjin, Shu Soto Drogayagi, Dinicha Jungurua, the D. Cheven Jundi, Pajotilia, Dungaja, Ganga Shu Yongurua. So that is to indicate the Kunola, she Kuno de Akol Narje Dayagida, then the Kuno Shuchimoko, Kuno Akol Potback, or Ganga Techuya. Some Jordi and Shukshimbo and Tashikan is to call the Shehot situation. The nation and the Jeva Tardu de Pajo Shene, then the Genja Kolia Ben Narju Dopushu, Yonga Shu Yonga Chavena. The Gen did that, the Twin Chimbo, 디 레름 조야도 다 제부디 그냥 나 맨날 야완 마게 와게 용글 용도 호브레 이 타제드 시도 말 배신 용글에 섬도
So because some people should they get too much shake read Tsongkhapa the Shungpi Kongla say
디디로 완전 제자지 그 주인 시지 배 강아 시운요야 그 단달 그 굴론 홀은 배 강아 시운요야 그 두부 시우 다에 삼다지 굴론 되네 삼다지 콜 주인 시지 콜 강아 두부 시면 주고와 니 녀외에다 주인디다 주인 첨보래 대자디 전체모자 콜이야 디버 첨보사와데 배가 살게 디면베다디와 자르도 주인 춘춘춘춘 시에저라 디스다다 되지 내가 살게 투에 차려 말이야
So to give an illustration of a lie that will have these the severity that will lead to the karmic imprint, having the severity that will lead to rebirth, say in a hell realm, it's not the average small lies that one tells, but it would be where someone falsely accuses someone else of having done something. And the person who's making the false accusation has an understanding of the severe consequences that will befall the person they are falsely implicating. So this person then, let's make a scenario, they arrested, they convicted, and perhaps in this process, because of the kind of country they are in, the police torture and abuse the person, and eventually after the conviction, they are executed. So the person who has falsely made the false accusation, they have an understanding of what may well befall this person. So a consequence of their lie is tremendous suffering. This person loses their freedom, they are then tortured, and then their life is ended. So such a person who has told this lie with an understanding of that consequence, would be an illustration of someone who's creating a very powerful non-virtuous imprint that would lead to the low realms. Whereas the kind of little lies people tell, it's not that these should be ignored, it's not that they're not non-virtuous, it's not that they don't lead to suffering, but to lead to a rebirth in the lower realms, and in particular, say in the hell realms, it needs to, a key component here, or the two key components, is some understanding of the consequences of this lie, and those consequences for the other individual being intense suffering, or immense suffering.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you.